Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to chapter 14 of the Modern Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Mufuz Chowdhury. I'm here with my incredible host, Camille, and we are excited to be back for the 14th episode of this incredible podcast show. But, listeners, before we even get into it, let me start off this great episode with some terrible, sad news that I think we need to bring out today, which is the fact that after dropping some incredible conversations about some of our favorite topics on this podcast show, we need to announce that next week, next Sunday, is going to be the season finale of season 1 of the Modern Mindset podcast. Camille and I have been discussing it, and it really looks like we've covered a lot of the big pillars of what we really wanted to bring out on this show in this entire season. And we're thrilled with how we've been able to package it. And I feel like it's just that right time. We never had a number in mind because we weren't sure if we felt comfortable wrapping up a show before we talked about the most important things that mattered in the underline of this season. But we feel really good about it right now. So I'm kind of excited as we approach the wrap up and then kind of touch base offline to figure out how to make season 2 even better. But Camille, as we approach the season finale next week, what has been your overall take of this experience? What has been your overall feeling about all the things that we shared? Do you feel like we covered all the ground that we needed to? Just talk to me about your experience with this show.
It's been amazing because this is my first podcast show, so I definitely feel like I've improved a lot, at least how I communicate. Always room for improvement, sure, but I feel like I'm starting to get my own stride and being able to be more comfortable, at least knowing that I'm recording and this is live, so there's no takebacks. And I think like it's amazing to think all the ideas we've actually come across and discussed how they actually formulated like within the moment. So I'm really happy that we got to do that and I learned so much doing so. I think we did do a lot with discussing like the main important things, and there it feels like the other stuff is more subconscious kind of stuff that will come just within the conversations that we will have and kind of naturally. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and especially since we have a break and returning back, we'll be able to bring back even more experiences, granted because it's the holiday season now too. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with all the stuff, and to see if I even follow my own advice, and then sharing the stories of maybe the blunders and the family awkwardness is going to be fun too. So I think we did discuss like all the important stuff, and I it's been an amazing experience. So I thank you a lot for it.
As I was mentioning just before we started recording, I really want to commend you in how much you've grown up with this show. Like your style, your communication abilities, your comfort level around a microphone and webcam has been very, very much noticeable. I don't know if a lot of our listeners know this, but even before we started the Modern Mindset podcast show, you and I actually have a podcast interview that we did in person, in recording, that's sitting on YouTube that people can look up. And you can kind of see like this was like Camille getting comfortable with breaking out of his shell, not sure, you were still a little skeptical about whether you should share these parts of your life or not. And you were hesitant. And during the interview, I poked you in many different opportunities to give you a chance to talk about these things. And you slowly started doing it. And it became a beautiful episode as a result of you in real time opening that side of you and dropping the shield, which I absolutely love. But now when you kind of compare who you are today in chapter 14 to that episode, you can really notice that you've really allowed yourself to feel comfortable and speak about the things that you were hesitant on, which I'm extremely proud that you were able to do that. And more than anything else, the fact that our viewers kind of get to grow up with us, like, at the very beginning of the show, we're kind of start talking about, are we in a relationship? What's going on with our life? Where are we going to next? And in each episode, we kind of talk about the evolution, about like, hey, we started dating or getting into this relationship, and this is what happened in this relationship. This is where we are in our relationship. And you're right. Like, I'm really excited about coming back from a season break and being like, where are they now episode you see in TV shows. I'm kind of excited to come back and show where we are now, because our goal is to keep getting better. Our goal is to keep making our setup better. And our goal is to keep coming back with real stories. So the fact that we're going out and living, even though it's a season break, unlike shows that, when a season break happens, you kind of put the storyline on pause unless they try to set it up like life was being lived, but then you kind of pick up from where they left off. But for us, we're not really picking up from where we left off. We're living life, and we're coming back, and we're continuing and trying to fill in the gaps of what happened between the season finale and the season premiere of number two. So I'm really excited about that. And as I constantly have told you on this podcast show, I would not be able to do this with anyone else, man. I'm so thankful that you have very openly and eagerly suggested that we do this together, and I'm extremely excited of what it became. I'm very excited to where it's going to go, and I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot more of that in our season finale that's coming up next week. Which I'm going to keep a tissue box close by in case some tears start shedding along the way. So here's what I want to get into today, Camille, as we're going laser focused one more time. And what excites me the most is our ability to really go deep on a singular topic, which gets very, very fun, is a conversation that in my podcast show that I've done before we started the Modern Mindset, the Ride With Me podcast show, I did an episode about this topic, which is the conversation around manifestation. And in my show, this was Mafuz about 2, 3 years ago. I remember I called the episode Reinventing Manifestation. And I came into this episode and I said, hey, listen, like, I'm going to reinvent what manifestation actually means. And I gave a very strong opinion about it. And part of me, as we're recording right now in real time, I'm not sure if I still believe that. And I'm not sure actually until I think this out loud with you. So I'm going to massage this a little bit and see where I land and see if I still believe what I believed before. But manifestation is a very, very hot topic. I think a big buzzword over the last couple of years, if not the last 3 to 5 years. Yet it gets defined in very different ways. And sometimes you get both extremities. You get people that are very skeptical about what manifestation is. They talk about like how the books like The Secret, which was very much about manifestation, they talk about how books like that are delusional, and that they're taking far too many drugs than they should, and their mind is drifting into a world that isn't real anymore. And then there's these other people that really go heavy on the conversation around vibrations, and how through different ways of vibrating you can actually bring in what you want through things like law of attraction and manifestation. Where do you reside on this scale between the two of them? And talk to me a little bit about your experience around manifestation, because I think this is the most beautiful way to lead into our season finale, which is the conversation around better manifestation. Talk to me, Camille.
Where do I land? Okay, so I do think in some degree that there is something to be said about manifesting what you want in life, but I don't think it's as intangible as what they describe, because then you could describe it as kind of a spiritual aspect, which I do think there's some sort of degree. And when you say vibrations, well, when people say vibrations, it's very vague, but at the end of the day too, there's something called binaural beats. And what that is it plays two different frequencies, which are vibrations of sound in each ear. And that the idea behind it is that kind of makes your brain forced to send brain waves which are also vibrations in a certain set pattern, which can like elicit a certain response. So like in the waking like conscious mind. Oh my god, I'm out of my depth here when I describe what I remember about sleep physiology, but I think it's alpha or beta waves, so that we have currently beta waves right now, and when we close our eyes, it elicits a different kind of wave response within the brain. So just having those vibrations alone promote a different sense of consciousness, a different sense of action and purpose. And so you can manipulate that by choosing which brainwaves to activate to have better responses, whether that's deeper sleep, whether that's more intense focus, or whether or not that is being able to relax. So there has to be something said about the vibrations, but I think that when you just say, I'm chasing a certain vibration, people are going to look at you funny. Where that comes to play, I think, in manifestation, or the law of attraction, as some people say, is that I think what it is, it's about sustained attention and focus. So when you focus on whatever you want or whatever you don't want, it grows naturally. So if you focus on the negative parts of life, that is naturally going to grow. And if you focus on the positive, it is going to grow, because I think subconsciously you chase what you're focused on. In the same way that when you learn how to drive, they tell you not to focus on having the wheel straight, but just to look where you want to go, and you're naturally going to drift there. That's what I think manifestation is. So I am sort of in the middle. I like to say that I don't think the people that are very much in the extreme of, let's say, the spiritual aspect are wrong. Uh, but I do have to say that I am more with them than more of those skeptical people. I do maintain a healthy level of skepticism, I believe. However, there has to be something said, and I think it's just a different language for the same kind of scientific principle, which we may not have exactly defined yet.
Yeah, and so well put with the example about driving a car. I never thought of it that way, but I very much remember my my aggressive and rude driving instructor yelling at me every time I would start drifting off into the other lane when I used to take driving lessons. And she used to say, like, look ahead at the houses and the mountain way out there. Stop looking at the road and the line. And I thought that was really interesting because that forever stuck in my head. And you kind of reminding that gave me some very sad flashbacks that I never want to revisit again. But it was a very good point. It's, you know, like when I think about the terminology that's being used, I think there's many variations of this definition. But I think the words are always mean different things to different people. Like you're right, like law of attraction is something you hear a lot of people say. I, on a very simplistic format, think of it as you know, the a statement that you and I have said multiple times on this show, which is what you feed grows, right? And to me, I actually think of it as attention. Where you put your attention to, right? And when I think about where you put your attention, it really comes down to the fact that you get fixated on something so much that you're always going to find a way to get there, right? There's a statement I used to use quite often in the past, which is if you want it bad enough, there's nothing in the world that will stop you from getting it. And if you don't get it, it means that you just didn't want it bad enough, right? And I think that that comes down to a few different things here. Like one part is that you make it a priority, right? Like when people say I don't have time, it's like that's just not a priority for you. Then you make time for the things that are priority. So the first part of really getting fixated on something is that it becomes a priority, which means you're willing to sacrifice other things in order to get there. Like if you knew that for you to be able to dedicate all your time to bring this initiative to life sometimes means like, hey, I'm gonna skip the gym and I'm gonna order in food and spend more money and I'm not gonna do all these fun things. Like you're actually making sacrifices because you ranked in your head that this is more important than your physical health, for example, right? So you start thinking about like rearranging your priorities as the first part of putting attention. But when you're really fixated on something, it doesn't just mean about thinking about it. And to me, this is where I've kind of had the problem is like, I see sometimes the part of manifestation ending at like, hey, meditate. And in the middle of your meditation, ask the universe to grant you this, or use gratitude to be thankful for the fact that you already have it before you have it and the world will give it to you. Again, I'm with you on that. I think there is some truth to that because then you're getting fixated on the fact that this is a priority and you're going to get it. Like you're basically recalibrating your mindset to promise yourself that you're going to get it. But the part that sometimes gets left out that really bothers me is the fact that your actions need to align with your ambition, right? Just having the ambition isn't enough. You need to align the actions with it. So again, I like the word attention and fixated because when you get fixated, you're also putting all your energy into it as well. You're now saying, listen, not only am I thinking about it, I'm going to work on it every day. You know, a good example of this was at the very beginning of this year, I really wanted to make it a priority to make speaking a big part of my career. And I mean like paid speaking. And I realized that even though I get invited to speaking events, I've never really positioned myself as a speaker. I've always positioned myself as a marketer and a podcaster who gets invited to speak. So what I decided to do last Christmas, okay, last Christmas holidays, I made a decision that I'm going to launch a website that will catapult my speaking career. I was fixated on the fact that I wanted to become a paid speaker. And I had my Christmas holidays. Now, here's a great example of priorities. It's like for Christmas holidays, a lot of people think of like rest, unwind, disconnect, right? Like do anything but work. But I was so fixated on this becoming a part of me that I actually woke up every morning. I remember I would have breakfast, I would bring the mug of coffee with me, sit on my laptop, and I would clock in like it was my day job every day. And I would clock in and I would put my feet up. I'd remind myself, like, hey, it is holidays. You know, I can take it easy. I can work a little bit slower. I don't need to work as fast and aggressively. I can take longer breaks. I can play music. I can watch Netflix once in a while. But I'm going to make sure that I clock in and I work on this website. And here's the thing, Camille, I knew nothing about how to design and build a website. That's the second part is I'm so fixated on the outcome that even when I didn't know the answers, I wasn't numb. I wasn't knocked out. I didn't get stopped. I wasn't put in a halt. What I realized that when I came to a roadblock, the fixation would make me find any solution to overcome that roadblock. So then I took a break from building and I went and I started looking up YouTube videos. How do I build a website? How do I design a website? How do I install a template? I started researching other speakers' websites, saying, what did they do and why did they get hired? How are they telling their story? What are their speaking topics? The fixation, very borderline obsession, allows you to really start thinking about how to overcome it and then keep working on it. The next part that I'll also get into later, which is also like you also start surrounding yourself with people who understand that same fixation because you're so hooked on it that you want to spend time with other people so you can almost absorb their knowledge and learn from them. But I think that's another big conversation piece. But that's kind of where my mind goes, Camille. I think it's like the manifestation, there's truth to it, but I think it needs to be better defined. And I think the better definition comes down to that you draw out an ambition, you recalibrate your mindset around it. But then the biggest part that is sometimes the difference between who gets it and who doesn't is getting so fixated on it that your actions start aligning with your ambition. And only then can you truly start seeing yourself either moving closer or achieving that thing that you were visioning in the very first place.
I have this kind of view with that I absolutely agree with the way you described it too, because that was a main problem I have with the whole idea of the law of attraction too, is that I found, well, when people discussed it, people used to manifest things like, I want, a certain car, or I want, all this money, and they put no action towards it. It's just, I'm telling myself I have it already, so it's going to come. And they didn't align themselves with their desire. So, and because I'm not them, I'm not sure if there was just a natural disconnect, or if that's like them trying to fool themselves into doing it, or if they didn't maybe want it enough. So they said they were manifesting, but not actually like putting in the sustained desire for that. So I'm not sure about that. But the point is, I also agree that there has to be some kind of action that aligns with that kind of way of thinking. The only time I will disagree with that, I think it's different when it comes to internal core values within yourself, such as maybe happiness or confidence. I think that's such a mental thing that I think just even trying to trick yourself into thinking you already have it is effective enough. But I feel like those are two separate like domains. One is about actual like physical kind of desire, or something that you need to actually put action towards getting, whether or not it is like career wise, or maybe with social relationships or anything like that, where the other is about internal like struggles that you may have. So that's where I believe the manifestation, just alone, not even with any kind of action, will be enough, because the action will come afterwards. But if it's like you said, that you have a specific goal in mind, which is, I want this outcome, it cannot be just desire. It cannot be just saying, I already have this, and kind of tricking yourself into it, because that's where you need the actual actions to get it. There's no way you're going to get something for free like that. And I think you drew out a perfect example where your desire was enough. You had such a strong why that you just didn't. You tried to get whatever could be possible to get the how. So I mean, like, you worked You saw Roadblock. You didn't let that stop you because you were like, okay, this I just need to know how to get how to do a better how. Let's say. So I think it's about carving out that why first and then focusing on the action. And when I say sustained attention, that's the thing. When you just focus on the next step and you say, like for instance, you were talking about the speaking of while building a website, and you just in your mind was like building a website, and that was there for I think you built it in 2 weeks, right? Which was insane to me. So you built it within 2 weeks from scratch, not knowing anything, nothing, but the whole time in your mind you held, I'm gonna build this website, and the longer you had it and the more focused you were with that, and the more you didn't allow these other distractions, which we can argue are even other priorities, that's what allowed you to get there, or at least allowed you to have that motivation. Well, it's more diligence and motivation to pursue that.
Yeah, part of that 2 weeks timeline is out of that fear that I'm going to lose motivation. Right. And, I've definitely, as someone that loves being creative and trying new things, the downside of that sometimes is, as they call it, the shiny object syndrome, where the next thing that flashes your eye, you drop what you're holding on to go chase the next thing. And I've had to manage that side of myself. As much as people say like, oh, it's a beautiful thing that you can get, you can get excited about life with all these different things and don't get locked in a box. I subscribe to that, don't get me wrong, but there also needs to be a part of you that needs to see a project through. And you'll never be able to see it through if you're instantly allowing that childish behavior of dropping the toy just to pick up someone else's toy. Like you got to have the mindset of playing with your toy first. And I think like that was a big part of why I did it in 2 weeks is I said, I need to quickly get that website out because I don't want something else to get in the way. For example, if the Christmas holidays ended and I started my work again, the work might have been taking up the time that I would have wanted to put in the website. So I think about that as well with how quick action, just as much as action can play a big role, because what happens with action is you're actually finding yourself building a system around that motivation, which gets really interesting, right? Because if you build a system quick enough while you're motivated, then you no longer need to rely on the motivation. You can rely on the system. And I think that's a big part that sometimes gets left behind. With working out was the other big part. Is like it was hard to get into the gym. It was hard to get motivated. I just got a warning this morning that we may have a snowstorm later today, and that scared the crap out of me. We haven't seen snow all year, and to me, it's like that scares me to think like, how do I keep going to the gym when I have to drive through a snowstorm to get there? And I remind myself that the system I have will allow myself to carry through. So building a system is a big part of it. But what you highlighted was, I think, really, really interesting, because you talked about the fact that the mindset isn't always about the material things or an external objective. Sometimes it could be internal facing. And I admittedly, even when we were talking about manifesting, I was thinking about attracting material things. I have to tell you, like, until you said it, I was like, you know what? You're so right. And I never thought of it that way, because it could also be about the internal things. And it could also be about not necessarily obtaining something, but moving away from something you don't like. Right. And to me, like when I think about what my motivation was, and again, terminology is important here because I didn't use the word manifesting, but when I hated like the parts of my life in my lowest lows, my motivator was to do everything I can to not feel that pain again. And to me, some might say it was manifestation to get out of that pain. So I think that that can also apply. So there's a part of me that's like, you can change yourself if you're not happy with your outcome. And that starts with pushing yourself away from the pain. You can also move towards a better life. And that's kind of playing on the offense and saying, I want to work towards a better life. But the worst mistake you can make is by staying stagnant, right? The worst mistake you can make is by saying, I'm comfortable with where I am. So as a result of that, I'm not moving at all. And I think that there's a big underlying discussion there around motivation that's required in order to move away from that. My website thing didn't just end at the website, Camille. Like it started off with completing the website in 2 weeks. And then I actually, we're in mid-November here, and I can tell you that I spoke at more events this year than I've ever had in my entire career. And I've earned more money speaking than I have in any year of speaking. And again, did I manifest it? Yes, from a mindset standpoint. But I didn't just stop at the website. Like I created an entire system where every week I'm reaching out to event planners. Every week I'm setting up meetings. Every week I'm sending out media kits and proposals. I have a follow-up system where I'm following up with them. There's this year I booked the largest paid speaking I've ever got in my life. And I only got that for my fourth follow-up. So imagine all the people that are reaching out but not following up. So like you think about the fact that you get so obsessively fixated that you don't let any no's stop you from getting your yes. You don't let anything stop you from getting to that end goal, even if it's roadblocks that make you slow down a little bit. And the part that I was talking about with surrounding yourself with other people is equally as important. I did this in the speaking world. I also did this in the fitness world, which is you get so big on trying to figure out how to be the most efficient that you start surrounding yourself with people who already figured it out. Right. And part of that is like, you're a great example of that. Like you have figured out a lot of things in your nutrition side that I'm still working on figuring out. So part of me finds me naturally asking you questions about it with genuine interest. Like I'm sitting here saying, I actually want to know. I'm not just making conversation. When I recently got into investing and I got really big on investing this year, and I found myself spending a lot of time in message boards and connecting with other individuals and even following them on social media and on Instagram so I can keep up with their content. You naturally create an ecosystem with your fixation that you're constantly figuring out how to be the best at achieving that goal. And I think that part needs to be so much more highlighted, because if that part is missing, you can sit around in your couch wishing for $1 million every day, but until you get your ass out of that couch, it's not happening. And I think that what happens in that example of wanting $1 million is first getting the mindset of saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that $1 million, then going out and researching about how to do it, then doing it and hitting those roadblocks that everyone else will hit, then researching how to overcome the roadblocks, then surrounding yourself with people who already did it so they could tell you how to overcome that roadblock and maybe even collaborate with you or give you some opportunities that you wouldn't have got otherwise. It's so hard to believe by this constantly nailing the wall down, you're not going to be able to figure it out. The only thing that's missing between that and someone else is the lack of patience. Because sometimes it's not something that will happen in the 90 days. It may not happen in the year. It may take years, but the people who get there are the ones that can stay on top of being patient enough to see that through, whether it is because of motivation or a consistent system. But I think I like the word that you use, which is sustainable. I think sometimes making it sustainable is what's going to get them there. And the ones that don't is, I think, falls into one of the two traps. They either have the shiny object syndrome and drop it for the next thing, or they just lack the patience of seeing it through. I think those are the two fundamental reasons of why someone is able to achieve it or not. And I've seen that happen over and over again in my lifetime.
I think it has a lot to do with reframing as well, because some people, when they see roadblocks, they think of it as failures. And then they start associating that failure with a failure within themselves, that I'm a failure because this happened. And that's where, you want to control the outcome too much, and then you let your anxiety take over. And then you become maybe depressed and demotivated, and possibly you start beating yourself up. I find a lot of people have that problem too, at least in my own personal experience. Throughout my life, I've had like many huge roadblocks which almost destroyed me, because I took that as an attack on my identity. Like, I wanted to be a police officer, and then I went into military reserves and I got injured, and I'm like, okay, the roadblock there is I can't do that anymore because I'm physically injured. And that to me felt like a failure. And then I felt like a failure, and I let that spiral down. And it wasn't until I had to think of a way, another way across. Because the truth is I saw it as a failure because I saw like that as my end goal. Like this, like police, law enforcement, military, this is my end goal. But actually, what was deeper than that, what I found because of this roadblock, is that's not actually what I wanted. What I wanted was to be able to help people and to support my community and whatever. And that was my why initially. It was just the way that I wanted to, the way that I thought I wanted to go about it. And that was kind of my top-down approach, which I think is paramount in deciding on how you get there. So if you have a goal, you have to break it down into, all these little steps. And what you have to do to get there. And we reference the book Atomic Habits a lot, and and he describes, what was the author's name again? I can't remember off the top of my head.
James Clear.
James Clear. So
Yeah.
James Clear describes that, it works on systems, and what's good is to actually adopt the identity instead of asking yourself, what should I do? You would ask yourself, what would, let's say if the goal is to become, I don't know, to get more physically fit, then you would ask, what would an athlete do? And that's you adopting the identity. And unfortunately, the dark side to that is when you hit a roadblock and you attach yourself to the identity too much, then instead of it looking like a roadblock and it's just you need to find another way around, it instantly becomes a failure. And that's the way that I looked at with the law enforcement. So when I started learning to kind of detach myself from the identity and learn to pick it up as a tool, that's what allowed me to go further. Because when I saw a roadblock, it wasn't an attack on my identity. It was just, this is not the way. So I just had to find a way around it. And when I found myself adopting that approach, especially lately, it has allowed me to, one, bounce back from anxiety and depression, and to actually work harder and to be more creative as well. And these setbacks are natural, so not associating that with a failure of me allowed me to be more confident in who I am. And the way we were talking about, I had to say, like, your approach into like a goal in the future, and then breaking down each steps, I think is so important, and the patient element has to be there as well. Our society, well, okay, there's a concept in Ayurveda which separates personality types into like three main ones, which is Vata dosha, it is Pitta dosha, and it is oh, why did I bring out the third one? I don't remember off the top of my head. Kapha dosha. And so what Vata is it's the wind and the void element, and what that means is that you become very interested in a lot of things, and you're very good at multitasking, and you're very good at you're very good at learning. And unfortunately, the downside is you learn quick, but you also forget quick. So naturally, it's the shiny object syndrome, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And our society naturally has become more and more that focused, because now multitasking is all that we talk about and all that we do. We have all these we have more than one screen on at a time, and we can't even have sustained attention on our own entertainment, which is amazing to think. That it's no wonder why we're so anxious, and we expect things to be done almost right away, or we expect outcomes to be there almost instantly. Video games are also like affecting us in that way too, because more and more video games remove the executive function, which is an executive function in the brain is about taking, let's say, a goal and breaking it down into like individual parts how to get there. Because, for instance, getting a job is not just getting a job, it's writing a resume. How do you write a resume? It's also about applying, it's also about doing the interview. You have to break it down in all those steps. So video games are naturally becoming more and more directive, where it's not as creative, and it's removing a lot of people's creativity. Now, I wouldn't say removing, but I would say it is not as easy now because of that. And the more and more we're focused on technology, the more and more we're not able to practice or sustain attention. And that's why meditation now is a very good practice. And to have that patience comes from that, and to understand that that our brains like this kind of dopamine hits that we get from everything we do and all the notifications we get, and the instant feedback. But we've forgotten about delayed gratification. A lot of us have, and I think you're right. We have to learn how to reprogram that.
This gets really interesting because as we go deeper, it almost seems like we're moving further away from manifestation. And yet it is such a big part of it when you think about a lot of the different chapters we talked about. My mind instantly goes back to first asking myself, like, why do people get impatient? Like, why are we so so quick to drop something that's not working and getting frustrated that it doesn't happen soon enough. And my mind quickly goes back to comparison, right? We see what other people have. We don't know how they got there. And instead of measuring how far we've come, we're measuring the distance between us and them. And without that information, we're beating ourselves up. We don't know that they might have dropped a lot of their priorities to make it happen sooner. We don't know if they got a handout. We don't even know if the things that we're seeing are real or just the illusion that's being created by the way that they're presenting themselves. Yet we see it as a hand-in-hand comparison, as if they've done the exact same thing we've done and they got a different outcome. And I think that part of the rewiring and reframing, as you said, is very important to be done, because if that part isn't done, you're going to lose patience. And if you lose patience, you're never going to see a goal or a mindset or a manifestation through as a result of the fact that you're assigning timelines for when you think things are supposed to happen. Where do those timelines come from? Who gave you those timelines? And why are you using those timelines as a measurement for your success? There are entrepreneurs who became rich overnight because their idea was released at the right time to the right people with the right demand, and they happened to become successful overnight. There are people that didn't even see their first million until late in their 60s to 70s. If you ever hear the story of KFC, you'll know that the story of KFC was created by someone who determined in their 60s that maybe they could start a business around their fried chicken recipe, right? Like it's just, there's stories for every type of success. What made you choose that one as the story that assigns your timeline is a very dangerous thing to do. Even if it's someone you think personally, even if it's your friend, even if it's your brother or your sister, you don't actually know that they went down the same path as you did, which is why it is first and foremost most important to recognize that your timeline is your timeline. Your journey is your journey, not theirs. And the more you realize that, the more you can be patient with the fact that whatever you're building takes time. And if you don't have it figured out right now, it doesn't mean that you'll never have it figured out. It just means that it's a process that you need to see through in order to get there. It's a beautiful thing knowing that the answer is out there, right? Like, it's crazy. If you think about whatever it is that you want to achieve, it's out there. It's not about whether it's out there or not. It's about whether you found it or not. So I would rather spend more time searching than more time comparing, because every minute that I'm spending comparing is less time that I'm spending on searching, which is really the answer to finding what I'm looking for. So it's a beautiful thing knowing that we can search, and through either information or people or opportunities that we find, we're going to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And I think that's such a big part that I really hope gets through to people, is that comparison is going to be, as they say, the thief of your joy. As you're seeing great results, rather than appreciating great results, you're beating yourself up because someone else is getting better results, right? Even when I talk about followers and you think about how big someone with 2,000 followers is, like, that's 2,000 people paying attention to you. Do you realize how rare or impossible that was in your parents' generation when they were kids? To have 2,000 people paying attention to whatever art piece, creative, or thought you put out there. It's a beautiful opportunity. And you can't let yourself get beat up by the fact that someone has a slightly bigger audience than you, because we don't know the full story. And I want to ask you this too, Camille, because you mentioned something, and I'm not sure where I land on this, because you use that your pursuit of being a police officer as an example. And I really like that example, because I think it kind of puts a plot twist on when things get derailed a little bit, how you adapted to that. Does that also state that it's dangerous to get fixated on a very specific manifestation? So let's say, like, the manifestation that you had was, all I want to do is be a police officer, right? The outcome based. All you want to do is be a police officer. I can't say in my life I've ever selected a outcome. I just knew I wanted a better outcome. And being that there was a vagueness of better, it actually gave me the opportunity to embrace the beautiful journey that sometimes doesn't go as planned. And I would say almost always doesn't go as planned, but it results in still the vagueness of me becoming better than who I was, which is why I love the vagueness of my manifestation. Is specific a dangerous thing? Should people stray away from having very specific outcome-based manifestation? And what are your thoughts around that?
I think in my case, the problem was it wasn't specific enough. for a lot of people, specificity is very important, and I think for me as well. So I can't. I'm happy to hear that for you, the vagueness of better is good enough, but for me, it's not. When my actual manifestation, well, the thing I was trying to manifest was to have a career, or no, it wasn't that. It was trying to help people. And that does sound very vague, but it is very specific. That was my core value, that I want to give back. And what I thought the way to achieve that was through being in law enforcement, because then I can support people, I can protect people. And that was my way. And I hyper focused on that, but I was actually missing the underlying, the deeper desire that I wanted. And that's why I suffered a lot, because I attached everything to that. And when it was I wanted to say almost taken away from me, but it was because when I wasn't able to do that, that's what completely broke me. If I instead actually understood myself better and saw that this is this is not actually all I want, this is just a way to get what I want, then I could have told myself, well, this way didn't work out, maybe there's another way. But it came from not being specific enough.
So let me go a little bit deeper with this question, because I'm trying to figure out what an important takeaway is from what you're saying, which is, so there might be someone in the world that says, I'm going to manifest to become a police officer, right? Like that might be their goal, and they might have gone through a similar situation as you, and then they come out and they're really really upset that they didn't achieve that, and they're saying like, oh, it's not possible, or the fact that, oh, it's just an obstacle, I don't care that I'm injured, I'm going to find a way to still become a police officer, right? Like they might get so fixated on that. And I don't want to assume or put words in your mouth, so I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I think I'm understanding you say is that it needs to be dissected even further to figure out the root meaning of why, right? So for example, like if I used that $1 million example before, the goal isn't actually to manifest $1 million, is to figure out why you want it. And it might be like, oh, I want it so I can feed my family. And so then you find out that maybe the $1 million wasn't the way to feed the family, there would have been a better solution, and that manifestation takes you down that path. Am I understanding that correctly? Like the mistake that people make is that they have an outcome base without figuring out the underlying desire for why they want that outcome, and they should be chasing the underlying desire rather than the surface level outcome. Am I understanding that correctly from your example?
Yes, that's the way I would describe it. Now there is something to say about like having like the short-term goals, which can be, for instance, if you're saying $1 million is the specific one, I would say, yeah, look underneath that, find out why $1 million, why that number, and what does that mean to you. Then you can look into all of that. But the whole point of setting that $1 million shouldn't be like that. It should be breaking down even to smaller ones, which should be like make a new stream of income, find out ways to get there. And then you could focus on those smaller ones as you're reaching that as a benchmark. So, like, I do agree that there are like smaller goals to reach that, but I think deep down, what's more effective for people, and especially if you're doing this to be happy, is to actually look at the underlying meaning why. Like, why do you choose the career that you want to go into? Why are you choosing these goals? If it can't be brought down to something internal, then I think it's not as effective.
Yeah, it's interesting because what I also hear you kind of outlining is that there's a separator between the why and the how, but sometimes people see how as their manifestation, right? So like the $1 million example is like, okay, I need to build multiple streams of income. Okay, so that's not necessarily what you're manifesting. That's actually the realization this is what you need to do to get to your deeper root, right? If I stayed with a job that I have and the job is paying $50,000, you're realizing in the math in your head, like, okay, this is how long it would take me if I spend $0. So it's not practical. What I need to do is start building another stream of income. So now the beauty of the how, which is something I really talk about, which is when your mind starts auto populating ideas, it gets quite fascinating because what happens in those situations is that by you asking your mind the right questions through the miracle of the mind, it's feeding you ideas that you never thought of that was buried deep inside, right? It's like, okay, I want to build $1 million. And I love that you started with saying, like, why? Okay, so why do I want to build that $1 million? Okay, I want to make sure my family has a good life. Okay, so now how do I do it? And now what happens is that your mind starts thinking, like, oh, it starts feeding you ideas, and they may not all be good ideas. They may not all be something that you want to do, but it'll give you ideas. And then you can start saying, like, okay, my mind is saying I need to start investing more, or I need to start saving better, or maybe me and the wife should get a job. And so we have dual income. Like, you're starting to think about different strategies as a result of the fact that you sat down and thought it through a little bit further than just saying, I hope one day I get the money. And like you know, like, I also have that deeper underlying passion of wanting to help others. As I say, lend a helping hand. But you know, in the world of business, we sometimes get told that for an objective to be specific, we need to attach smart in front of it, right? And smart starts with S being specific, but then we also have measurable, attainable, timely, or sorry, realistic, and then timely, which spells out smart. So when I think about how specific we're getting, I guess this is the next question, Camille, is like, how do you know that your manifestation is working? So if I say I want to help people, like, I could open the door for someone that has maybe groceries in their hand, and I could say, done, you know, manifestation achieved. Like, how do you know where the extremity of where that goes? Like, do you need to attach a number? Like, when you say we need to get more specific, do I need to say something like, oh, I need to be able to help this many people a year? And then the downside of that is, does it get concerning that I didn't help this many per year, or that what I had wasn't actually realistic? Like, I might say 10 billion people this year and it just wasn't realistic. Like, where does that specificity end? And like, how deep do you go down that rabbit hole?
All right, so I think the specificity ends. It doesn't end because I think it goes down to your core values. Once you be specific enough, and you think about what you want to desire, and you actually break it down and go deep enough, you'll realize that this is who you want to be at the core of your being. And when you allow that, then you ask, whenever you do an action, then you can always ask and ask yourself, is this in line with my core beliefs? And that way you have an unlimited source of not motivation but diligence towards whatever goal you're chasing. And then you're right, the smart things make it easier because then you have short-term little goals to reach a bigger goal. So well, when you use the example like opening a door for someone and that's it, I don't think that'll be it. It'll be good enough for, I mean, good enough for you because that's you being in line with your core values. Because you had the choice of whether or not to open the door or not, and you wanted to be that lending helpful hand, and that was a way that proved that you're acting in a way that's in line with your core values. So in those regards, what I mean is that when people want to manifest something and they want to manifest something, I feel like it's a deeper sense of that they're lacking in their purpose, and they want to have something. Well, when they manifest an external thing, it's really deep down in a missing internal thing that's not as well developed. And they believe once you attain that external thing, that allows that internal core value to be developed enough that you'll won't have that sense of longing for it. So I think what it ends up being is is a way to prove to yourself that you're acting in line with who you want to be, and that never ends.
I love it, man. So now that we've done a really good job in defining the ideal of manifestation under our own terms, you know, like our definition of it, which I think people will have different definition, but based on what we talked about, which there's also a heavy emphasis in not only understanding the deeper meaning of the manifestation, but also aligning your actions to make sure that there's actually a follow through happening with patience along the way. I'd love to dive into some personal stories of things that you believe that you have manifested with our definition, right? And first and foremost, I think, if I could start, one that comes right into mind was the fact that I broke into the marketing industry the way I wanted to. You know, I've when I long before I've had any experience in marketing, all I was doing was pouring coffee for a living. You know, at one of our local coffee shops here at Tim Hortons, and I was doing that for such a long time that it never once crossed my mind that marketing was what I wanted to do. But somewhere along the way, I started realizing through tasting different things outside of my job that marketing, specifically digital marketing, on the social media website, advertising side, I started realizing that this is something that I love doing. And at that moment, without actually calling it manifestation and fully understanding what it meant, the definition still was in play, which is I wanted it bad enough that I was going to find a way to do it. And why I loved it was very clear to me because I love the idea of giving me the freedom to work in this creative playground and create without limitations. And to me, that was my underlying desire. So as I started pursuing it, it didn't stop me that I didn't have experience. I didn't even actually think of like from a strategic standpoint of what's going to work. I'm like, I'm just going to keep trying and find out what sticks. And it just so happened that it was me going aggressively on LinkedIn and researching CEOs of marketing companies and messaging them that resulted in starting the business in the way that I have, while at the same time, all the things that I was doing on the side, building my own blog that didn't look great and building some, playing in the ground of social media, I was able to use that as leverage in my job interview to show that I understood marketing. So everything kind of lined up. And then everything kind of lined up so often for me that I've kind of come out and said, like, I need to stop pretending like things aren't just happening for me. And I remember I had this conversation with you. I was like, listen, the world is actually finding a way to line everything that I've done, both good and bad, to actually show me that it was all happening for a reason. And I need to stop pretending like I'm not seeing that. And so my mind started getting a little bit on the spiritual side there, but we could dive into that in just a second because I am curious about your take on that as well. But I want to start with that, Camille. Let's ping pong a couple real life examples of things that in our definition of manifestation you've kind of seen come to fruition.
Well, I'm trying to go as deep as possible to core values again. I discovered that a core value of mine is discovery, and that extends to almost everything. So that can be discovery of something externally, internally. It can do with a lot of learning, a lot of teaching. And what I found over the years, the more and more I think about it, is that no matter what I've done has some sort of combination with in it. And I mean, even as like a kid, I didn't like spend a lot of time with other people that much, and I would do things like play some video games or read or study and do some other things. And then as I got older, I became more and more exploratory within that. So I became more interested in other things within myself too, and how I fit into the world I live in. And when I wanted to be a police officer, I believe that, of course, it came from a sense of wanting to help people, and that's another core value. But it also came from a sense of discovery that I wanted to get this experience, and I wanted to see maybe the ugly sides of life, and deal with maybe people that usually are troublemakers, to say the least, and that'll expose me to who I actually am and how I am under that pressure and to the real world out there. When that didn't work out, I decided to chase medicine, and so I did that as a way to again help people, but also to learn. And the thing I loved about medicine is that I was learning so much because there are all these different diseases, all these different structures within the body, all the physiology that I had this unlimited source of curiosity and kind of like happiness. It was amazing to think like learning something new was just it gave me almost like a certain high that it didn't feel like work to me. It felt almost like a sense of purpose. And later on when I started when you learn as much as you can, then it becomes memorization. That's when it became very hard to do. But what I manifested there was this kind of sense of discovery of the world. And then what I learned later on too is that I love to discover who I am, and so I did a lot of things with self experimentation, with nutrition, with bodybuilding, with exercises, with all sorts of like I guess like drugs as well. not like any hardcore like street drugs, but like of course like marijuana, alcohol. I was interested in that just for the self exploration side and the social side too, but also like psychedelics and exploring my mind and different facets of it. And also like meditation and like the Eastern philosophy and then like world religions, like it all ended up cultivating this manifestation of I want to know myself better and I want to know the world outside me better. And we can like put one word to that, which is discovery. And what I manifested was what I ended up manifesting as a result was I have a medical degree now. I'm going to be working in a career where I'm going to be helping people and supporting them through their troubles and trying my best to treat them. So I manifested that indirectly from having that core value, and I didn't realize it at the time. It's just I wanted so bad. I called it. I wanted to find my purpose, and what that was through exploring my core values, and that's why I discovered too that I feel like I betray myself when I let myself stagnate. And how I counter that is learning something new, picking up maybe a new hobby, or reading a book which teaches me more. Having in having genuine conversations and genuine connections with people that I find interesting and that I don't know much about, like all of that cultivates this manifestation again of discovery, because I learn every day something new.
Man, it is so hard to stay bored when you have a passion for wisdom and learning new things. I got to tell you, like, I was chatting about this with my girlfriend Priya yesterday, and I mentioned to her that for the last 4 or 5 years, and as a matter of fact, as far as my mind will remember, but at least the 4 or 5 years, which I have a good thumb on just based on my releases and things that I've done in my career, I just don't let myself get bored. And if I do, it inspires me to do something better and something more exciting. And sometimes that results in what you're kind of talking about, which is like learning something new or surrounding yourself with someone new or putting yourself in an uncomfortable spot that tests you. And I think that was a great reassurance that every year will just keep getting more and more exciting because we're just going to keep learning and adding these things. It's a beautiful thing when you learn something new, Camille. It's like that new excitement because you're like, oh, a new untapped resource that I knew nothing about. And then you go into that untapped resource and now you acquire that knowledge and now you bring it back and apply it to other areas of your life, like your social skills. Like you can bring that up in conversations or you can apply that if it matters in other areas of your life. So nothing really just gets treated as an external pillar. It's more like it gets blended in with who you are and what you do. And that just allows everything to get infinitely better. And that's where it gets exciting is knowing that you can layer on your current lifestyle and that layering allows your lifestyle to get better and evolve, kind of like leveling up a character in a video game, which I think is always great to think about it from a comparison standpoint. So we talked a little bit about from a career standpoint and in many ways our core value standpoint, but I also want to point out that these manifestation examples don't just end on something so magnificent, like it's even on small things. This podcast, I was just thinking, is actually a good example of something that we manifested. Like you and I during the lockdown period, we're spending a lot of time really getting to know each other on a deeper level. I would say deeper than we've ever gotten to know each other, just because we've given ourselves an environment that involves just going really, really micro on topics for hours at a time with no interruption, which if you think about it, would have happened many years ago if we had that opportunity. It just never happened. And when we finally started getting to that level of deepness, you and I had a realization that these were conversations that we wish we had a recording for, only to revisit ourselves because we were learning so much from it. And it gets sad when you realize that it's hard to remember many parts of our conversation, thus resulting in us now kind of talking about like, hey, why don't we start recording our conversations? Then we started saying, why keep this wisdom to ourselves? Why don't we share the wisdom to others? Then talking about how do we make it happen? We hit some roadblocks and saying, oh, we're not in the same place at the same time. We don't quite have the environment for a clean microphone setup. It doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint, but we still overcame that roadblock and did it through a virtual environment using a Zoom and YouTube platform. And then we're trying to challenge ourselves to keep making it better and more polished every episode. Hence why we have better microphones, better system of uploading files, better video quality, and later hopefully with me manifesting this right now live on air, with us doing it in person, so that we could really give it the ideal quality that we want to give it. But again, from a micro standpoint, there's also a lot of unlimited examples that if people think about it, even though they didn't call it manifestation, they actually do it all the time. And that's going to be the realization that it is possible and it is real. It's not just a figment of your imagination. And then when I think about it from a personal standpoint, I think from relationships that you and I have talked a lot about on this show, but in a very short couple of minutes, if I could summarize it, it was the fact that I knew that there was an ideal person out there. I didn't fully know how to define what an ideal person was. I just knew that I had the patience to wait it out until I found it, and thus avoiding a lot of roadblocks, a lot of relationships that could have been really bad ones, a lot of pressure from society and family members. But, at the age of 34, did I then find the ideal person for me. And it happened as a result of me not just wishing for it, but actually going out on those dates, actually putting myself out there, actually willing to have those tough conversations, actually willing to put myself in difficult situations that wasn't the most comfortable or ideal scenario, not folding my hand just to please the other person, and really being able to see the true colors of that other individual that made me realize that they were not for me, and then later figure out the one that was for me. So from a relationship standpoint, I think I very much, I'm going to put it in air quotes here for my video viewers, I manifested it, which to me, honestly, what I think it meant was that I gave it my all, and I waited patiently, and I waited it out without settling, which I think is a big green light that I want to give back to why patience is such a big part of it, because you just don't know what age it's going to happen. And I didn't let the fact that some people, whether it's real or not, but claim to find the love of their life at like late teens or early 20s, I didn't let that comparison throw me off my course and my vision to find what I was looking for as well.
With me in relationships, I think I'm in a similar way, where I didn't I didn't really. I was a late bloomer. I didn't really start actually like going on real dates and stuff until I was like 21. And the whole time I was in high school as well, trying to manifest one. Like I was thinking about it constantly, but in a selfish way. And what it was is actually I wasn't trying to manifest, being in a relationship and having love. What it really was is I really wanted the loneliness to end. And as a result, I just had the wrong. I wasn't aligned with what I actually desired in the beginning. And then when I broke it down further, it was that I don't feel like I belonged, and I wanted a sense of belonging, and that's the main thing that I really wanted. And so I found that in my friends, but I was so unaware at the time that that's actually what I wanted, that I was focused on, if I have a girlfriend, then this is my sense of belonging. And
Sorry, can
sorry,
I
yeah.
can I just throw a couple of things in there? There was a couple important points that you mentioned there. One of them was like why that mindset is important is super big, because like you saying like I just want the loneliness could end could have resulted in a very toxic relationship, but you're like, hey, at least I'm not lonely, at least that's fine. And then the other part to it, that's also the fact that maybe what you were manifesting and hoping for wasn't actually what you wanted, but what you saw that others were happy with, right? So it could be in movies of what an ideal relationship looks like, or it could be like people that you see that are portraying this perfect relationship, and you're like, I want that. So maybe we didn't know. And I can admit that I definitely didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted. I thought I wanted what others were having until I later realized what I really want.
And I'm glad that you brought it up, because that's where I was going too. Is that later on in my early to mid 20s, that's when I really wanted to have my life together. And what I saw was the family side. Like I really wanted to have the romantic side there. And as a result, I looked I looked for what I wanted, and I explored, dating and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, I found someone who I really connected with and had a really intense relationship with her. And the whole time I was like, this is it, because like this is how everyone tells me it's supposed to be. Where I have comparisons on what love is, I have comparisons on what a good relationship is, I have all of that, and a lot of it dealt with compromise, which I didn't know, and a compromise in a way that was compromising myself, not and compromising who I am, not necessarily having the relationship build a mutual compromise, which I had no idea. I thought what compromise meant was self sacrifice, which was what I was doing the whole time because, again, I was comparing myself to what the perfect relationship looks like from what everyone has been telling me. That, that me as a guy, I have to do whatever I can for that person, even if it's at the cost of my own being, is the way that I was taught. Maybe not for most people, but that's the way I was taught, that I don't really have a say in what makes me happy, and I have to give all of me to the relationship. There's no questions about that. And
That's where the happy wife, happy life statement comes from, isn't it?
yes, yeah, exactly. And as a result, when I did propose to her, even though it wasn't, actually at the time when I did propose, it wasn't really toxic, but later on it ended up being toxic, a toxic relationship to both parties. I'm sure that I did some bad stuff too, so I'm not all innocent, but it's because I settled for that relationship because this is what I thought I wanted, because this is what everyone was telling me is the way it should be. And I didn't ask myself what I actually did want. Instead, I just told myself that I wanted a wife, I wanted kids, I wanted the family, and I wanted to put my life together. And this is the way to do it, and this is the cost. And the cost was myself, and I didn't realize that until much later. And that's why it was very important to actually understand what I actually wanted and what I was trying to manifest was like a life that I'm happy in. I just thought that, these are temporary setbacks, or this is the cost of having a happy life. Is that there's a sacrifice that has to be done, and you're gonna be unhappy sometimes. And and I thought even for periods like, it's gonna be, it's just a couple months, but then like it means it's a lifetime of happiness. It's just a couple. What's a couple of months for a lifetime, right? So I realized that like with these things, when that relationship ended, and I was able to think about what I actually wanted, and it didn't end up. It was it ended up being nothing like that. And then eventually, when I put myself out there again, and telling myself that what I want is a genuine connection, and I want a partner that I can work with well, and that we decide the rules of the relationship, but we both have to agree. Like that is what I want. And I guess that's, since I was so hyper focused and being hyper specific about what I wanted, it allowed me to actually meet someone that I feel right now shares the same beliefs. And we talk about that, and it seems like, everything works out well. And that's what is amazing. It's just, I thought it was impossible because I thought I was too demanding, but it really is possible to actually find that. You just have to know what you want specifically, instead of having the vague promise of what you hear from other people.
And to add to that last statement that you said, I don't think you even need to always know what you want, but you need to also respond to the things that your body is telling you that it doesn't want, right? Like, the relationship I have right now, before I had this relationship, if I was asked to define my perfect relationship, I don't think I could have explained this, right? Like, I didn't know this was actually what I wanted. It was more like I just knew the other things were things I didn't want. And paying attention to that, I think, is equally as important in the discovery of trying to figure out what you want, which it does benefit to go through those sometimes so-called bad relationships, because it gives you hints of things that you did like about it, right? You'll be like, I like these parts, but it wasn't worth it as a trade-off that I had to sacrifice these parts. But then you find that in the next relationship, you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. And to me, like that to me makes spoke volumes, is that realization. And I hope for many people that are listening to this, when they hear both our case studies and both of how that, although sometimes in your head you have that hard conversation that maybe I'm asking for too much from the world. And what that results in is you lowering the bar, as sometimes people tell you, like, oh, you need to lower your expectations. Maybe that's not always the answer. Maybe there are better things out there. Maybe just because the people that are telling you to lower the expectations haven't found it, doesn't mean that they don't exist. right? If someone out there in the world has been able to achieve something that you want to achieve, it's out there. It's just a matter of can you find it within your lifetime, and hopefully sooner than later, than much later down the road. And I think that part is worth happening. Now, sometimes I've also accepted the fact, Camille, that there are things in our life that we're going through that we're still in the middle of the tunnel, so we haven't seen the fruits of our labor, right? So sometimes we're like unsure, like, hey, is this actually going to work, or does this actually lead to anything? And I got to tell you, relationship was probably the longest part of that tunnel for me. I think it was the longest tunnel that I was in the middle of, which is why for a very long time I didn't have the confidence to come out and say like, hey, I think things do happen for a reason, right? Like I was kind of like, well, I don't know, because that hasn't happened yet. So now that I've kind of seen this kind of unfold over the last while, something that I've been talking to you a lot about is the fact that I don't want to pretend that this isn't happening to me. And the part that I was telling you about was the fact that I've started to finally see different parts of my life coming together almost like a beautiful poetry that didn't make sense at the beginning, but at the very end you're like, I now understand why every part of this made happen. I think of Will Smith's got a movie called 7 Pounds, and I need to throw out a spoiler alert that I'm gonna ruin the crap out of this movie. But so 7 Pounds was, I remember when it came out, I watched it in the theaters, and I remember that nothing in the movie made sense. Like I've never sat through a movie where I'm like, what is happening? The entire movie, like nothing made sense. And it was only in the last 5 to 10 minutes everything made sense. And then you go and watch it, and you're like, what a beautiful thing! How beautiful it was that they could confuse us for so long, and then answer our questions in just 2 scenes. And I feel like that's happening right now in my life, where like there's a lot that was happening, good and bad. And especially I want to put an exclamation mark on the bad ones, because the bad ones was the ones where I'm like, okay, there's no way this is happening for a reason. Like this is so bad. Like there's no way this is going to result in something good. But I'm kind of at that point of the 7 Pounds movie where I'm kind of starting to see all the scenes come together, even the worst ones. And I'm starting to have conversations now like, hey, where these things meant to happen? Like when we talk about manifestation and going down the spiritual extremity, there's a part of me that's starting to see that things happen. And I'm curious to get your take on it of whether I'm logically like almost reaching and saying, okay, this somehow circled around and it does make sense. Or have you been seeing that as well? Because you and I exchange notes, and sometimes it's kind of beautiful seeing like something happened in the past resulted in something better. Do you think that's just us with human nature, like the way that we interact with each other? We just find a way to make sense of these things, or do you actually believe that it's happening? Because I got to tell you, lately, I'm a little bit more on that side of saying that things are unfolding out the way it was supposed to, which makes me a lot more optimistic and confident about the future. But I'd love to get your take on this.
It's funny because I think, naturally speaking, since I have an education in medicine, I'm supposed to say that we're just trying to find meaning in whatever we have. But no, I don't believe that. I really don't. I think you know what's perfect too? The symbolism behind 7 pounds we can use now. That you had to give your life, you had to give your sight. I forget what else he donates, but you have to give. If you give all of yourself away, then you create a better world. And I think the more and more I give myself to whatever it is that's going to happen, the more benefit I get. And it makes me think the same way, that there has to be some kind of underlying purpose that's going on that I don't understand. And this meaning that I have, the more and more I chase it, and the more and more I deeply define and carve it out, it makes more sense that everything falls into place afterwards. And it's more that I was so unrefined, and these challenging moments, which ended up being the bad experiences, I say in quotation marks, were really meant to not break me, but to shape me. And I mean that, like, if we could use an example, like, you won't be able to stick to the target with a rock, but you will with an arrowhead. So those kind of experiences, they could have we could have argued it broke me down, but it made me sharper. And I just find that I didn't understand in the moment, and the whole time when I was suffering, I was begging for it to end and begging even for my life to end at some points. And the more and more I get older, I can look back and see that I understand why that makes sense. That I can even trace back certain moments to certain realizations that I have now and how everything makes sense and I'm the best version of myself I've ever have been. And I'm more and more of myself as I age. And that's as a result of not just living longer, but actually defining that and looking at myself more closely. And I think it goes the same with love too. That in my current relationship, that we're still pretty fresh. Like we've known each other for a little over a month, and I within the third date, I told her that that I wanted to have a relationship with her. I want her to be my girlfriend, and I just completely gave myself away, and I meant in the sense that what I felt I actually expressed, and I didn't hold back because of the fear of judgment, the fear of losing, and all that kind of stuff. I actually gave myself, and I did that willingly, even though it was terrifying. And I said all these things which people may not which people would say, well, that's too much, or this is you're actually doing harm by doing this. But I think I was acting in a way that was so forthrightly myself that it made sense at the time, and I'm seeing the fruits of that. And as a result of that, I have an amazing relationship now that I had to say that I've never felt this way before. And it seems like everything lines up just in the sense of even in the relationship, but even in my life in general, just like all these things are stacking upon each other. And I don't know where it goes. I don't know where it's going to go, but I know that even when it gets bad, that it's temporary and that it leads me to a better place. And it kind of makes sense that there is some meaning towards these events. And I used to, I think even a couple months ago, I used to hyper focus on everything. So I used to be like, okay, so I know that there's meaning behind this event. So what's going on? Like, I had, I forget, like, I think like 2 or 3 months ago, I had someone in a drive through ahead of me pay for my meal. And I was like, this never happens. Why? And I started to hyper focus because of that, and then I realized that that just takes away from the experience too. So you have to have some kind of balance between that and just being able to be grateful instead of being like, why is this going on? This doesn't make any logical sense. So therefore, I'm missing a lesson here. And I think letting go of that and actually like surrendering yourself to the process and surrendering yourself to any experience allows you to benefit the most from it and allows you to actually live. And I think when you look at the other side and you say that there is no meaning, you're just creating meaning behind it, I also think that's taking away from the experience.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, your comparison of taking 7 pounds and bringing it into our conversation was freaking brilliant. I think that was like that's some genius poetry right there, my friend. I love the analogy, and I think it's there's so much more truth to that. Like, gosh, that was so well put. But yeah, you're right. It's like I come back to that concept around choosing your delusion, right? You could choose to be the one that believes that everything happens for a reason, or you could choose to be the one that says that's a little bit skeptical and says, no, we're just assigning meaning to everything and trying to make sense of it. But I think the first one of believing that everything happens for a reason makes you more optimistic about the world. It makes you not like throw everything away and burn the house down when something goes wrong. It makes you say, I know this is going to lead to something better. So you kind of stay more open-minded to what opportunity it results in. And I would rather choose that delusion in my lifetime than the one that's saying, no, this is just a shitty situation. And I feel bad about it. And I don't let me bounce back, which I think is a lost opportunity. So I do choose that delusion that it does happen for a reason, but it's a lot more fun when you start seeing that the factual and the historic data is actually aligning with that belief. And to your point, I think it's impossible to figure out why one thing will lead to another at that given moment. I think it has to be retrospective. Like, Imagine 7 pounds, you stopped after the first scene and you're like, what does this mean? Like you just won't know until you know the whole
Yeah.
movie. So you have to kind of see the journey through fruition. And sometimes the payoff doesn't happen for years, right? Like bad relationships, sometimes it takes years before you see why the best relationship happened because of that bad relationship, which also ties in so many other micro things. I remember, man, when I used to go to high school and even like university days, like I used to see couples that I love. Like I thought they were amazing couples, but I'm only looking at it from the outside and I'm trying to figure out like what it is about this guy that the girl was attracted to. Like, was he physically like it was his physical appearance? Was it the one corny joke? But we don't actually realize all the introspective wiring that was needed for that person to show up like that, including the confidence that they deserve that amazing girl, right? Like it's like you go through these bad relationships, you rebuild yourself, you become the person you are. So by the time something so amazing comes your way, you don't just say, I got lucky. You say, I damn deserve to be here. And as a result of that, that confidence allows you to do things like put yourself out there, ask a girl out quickly, and say, I love you in record time. And you don't feel like you're doing it out of the fear. You're doing it out of the confidence that this is what you want to do and you're okay with the outcome because you just know that constantly that there'll be something better if it didn't work out the way it's supposed to. And that also results me into pushing this delusion a little bit further, which is I think you get presented with the opportunities when you're ready. And I think that this is one of the best motivators, in my opinion, to why we should always try to get better. Because there's been a clear correlation that the better that you get, the more opportunities that you get. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out that that's the case. You become an amazing basketball player, you're probably going to get an NBA contract, right? Like LeBron James wouldn't have gone a LeBron James contract if he wasn't trying to get better as a basketball player. There's a clear correlation that getting better will get you better opportunities. I believe, and I had this conversation with my girlfriend, and we actually kind of like backtracked a little bit, and we kind of thought about like how we had two independent journeys, and we were kind of going through our sets of challenges. Me at different ages, her at different ages. Me a different challenge, her a different challenge. Mine might have been career wise, her might have been education, mine would have been a relationship, her might have been family related. Like we kind of went through our own hurdles, but we kind of met at the moment that we've overcame it together. And like we kind of actually figured that out. We were like, okay, from a financial standpoint, we both eliminated our debt at the same time. From a career standpoint, we're at the best points in our career. From a relationship standpoint, we've grown into the individuals that we're the happiest that we've ever been. Like there was so much in alignment with the fact that we met at that time. And I think that's part of the correlation that I subscribe to, which is the fact that you get presented with the right opportunities at the right time. I'm glad, some might say like, oh, I wish I met the girl that I love like in my teenage years. So we would have had more years together. But I think about like, do I? Like, do I want her to meet the teenage me? Like the one that I was unhappy with, the one that I didn't like, the one that I felt like I needed to grow past that shyness. Like, do I want to meet her earlier? Probably not, because if I met her earlier, I wouldn't be dating her today. I wouldn't be in a relationship with her today because there's a lot of things about me that I was still working through at that time. So that goes in with my philosophy of also trusting the timing, right? And if you really trust the timing, the patience comes in as a package deal. Is you understand that if things were supposed to line up with where you are in your personal development, you're okay with the fact that things come a little bit later. You're okay with the fact that things didn't come sooner. If I got the amount of money that I have today at a younger age, I would have blown it all away because my spending habits were terrible. And I would spend it on things that didn't even matter the next day. Like I was so bad at spending that I'm glad I got that part and that opportunity today. So I love timing, man. And I love being patient. And I love the excitement of knowing that every year keeps getting better and life keeps surprising us with more opportunities. And in the spirit of manifestation, I'm so excited about the fact that because I have my North Star, my core belief of what I want to achieve, I'm really embracing. And as you said, like really taking that journey and really allow yourself to surrender to the process. I'm really loving the so-called delusion that I subscribe to because it's given me nothing but happiness. And I think it's worth considering, though we may not get the answer to in our lifetime, it's worth considering which alternative gets you the better outcome down the road.
I share the same idea too, where these moments have to present at the right time too, and everything kind of lines up almost perfectly if you allow it to. I think like I think back to it as well, and I if I decided, let's say, we'll go with career. If I decided with career that I wanted to be a doctor since I was little, I don't think, despite that I had discipline as a child, what happened later on in my life is I became very nihilistic, and I didn't work. I didn't put effort towards anything, and it wasn't until I joined the military reserves where I developed that discipline again. So it wasn't, if I didn't have that, I don't think I would have the discipline to go through medical studies. And also, if I didn't get injured, and if I didn't have the bad experience I had with doctors, I don't think I would have been as passionate about trying to be a good doctor and trying to actually like grow myself in those skills. I think I would have just done, taken the path of least resistance and done whatever I can just to pass, just to get my licensing and whatever. So I think knowing that, and then also having my own psychiatric issues, I think that allowed me to actually like research more about the mind and research more about like possible therapeutic options. And as a result, now that led me to this belief that I want to be a psychiatrist and I want to help people go through that as well. That go through that. I think all that had to line up, and it's funny enough, even with all those moments, it wouldn't have made sense if it wasn't for a couple of months ago where I actually developed I finally had for a long time, this feeling of peace, that I'm actually okay with my life, and I'm actually okay if tomorrow's my last day, let's say. And that feeling was something I was chasing and fighting for a very long time, because I never felt like I was enough. And I did whatever I could to prove myself, well, to build myself up to do that. And it wasn't until what I realized is that, it's all in my head. And it took everything. It took me, graduating my military course. It took me graduating through med school. It took me through overcoming my injury from, uh, being obese at one point to becoming really fit. It took all this time, all this effort, and like feeling confident to be able to even accept compliments. Like all that had to happen through having all these bad times, through whatever. But every single time it was at the right opportunity. And I mean, because I got injured in the military, I had the opportunity to actually go to med school, because I'm not sure if I shared the story yet, but when I went to med school in Poland, I only had enough money for the first year, and my parents couldn't really help me out financially. But I got really lucky, and actually, because when I submitted my paperwork to quit, to leave the military reserves, they I had a clerk at the office who received the papers who knew me personally, and was like, and she called me and she said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't do anything, and I just feel like crap the whole time, where like I can't do any of the exercises. I'm on modified duties, and that pretty much makes me just watching people like do their exercises. I can't even get promoted because of my injury. And she's like, yeah, but you have a physical injury as a result of the army. Um, you had it proven. Get a medical release instead. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have been able to apply for short-term disability, which then ended up becoming long-term disability, and I wouldn't be able to be in a program right now that actually like pays for my schooling. So I got really lucky. All of
Wow.
that had to happen at the right time, and I had to have the right amount of confidence to take that risk, because I had the opportunity to go, to take that path 2 years earlier, but I was scared to. But if I took it 2 years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to pay for it. If I if I wasn't able to pay for it, I would be really like, well, I wouldn't be able to like do anything, and then I would be actually worse off than I was. But all of that worked out in the moment, and I wasn't able to see it either until after it happened. And through working on through meeting all these people and meeting like very interesting people, and then having them respect me and having that sense of belonging through them made me actually realize that I'm actually a valuable person. And it was amazing to think that all of this had to go in the sequence. It had to work out in the exact sequence that it did, or else I wouldn't come to this conclusion, and I wouldn't have this feeling of peace of who I am. Is amazing.
Bro, it sounds to me like the when she came in and said, "What are you doing?" Like that was your guardian angel sent down at the right moment and saying, "Hold on a second, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah.
Let's not make this mistake here." And it's oh God, what a beautiful story. I think you've told me a variation or a short version of that story, but never in that much detail, man. I love that you shared that, and it's so beautiful when you get a chance to take a look back at it and really appreciate that these things have to happen. And it's worth noting one thing that I think we've kind of hinted at, but maybe not said it up front, which is you have to be flexible enough to change with the flow and with the currents, right? Because it doesn't seem like ours was anywhere near linear. Like it seems like a mess if you look at it on a roadmap. But at the same time, it's like if we didn't change our sales or change our directions, we would have been actually pushing against the process that we were supposed to surrender with. And I think that's important to do, where a lot of people kind of see change as in like like it's plan B. Like I gotta jump off the plane, so I better, like, if I have to jump off the plane, I might as well hold on to a parachute, and the parachute becomes a plan B. But I think the change is plan A, and it's where you're saying I am going to jump off the plane. It is going to happen. I don't know when, but when it happens, I'm ready. So you have the parachute as a result of that. And I think that mentality is important to have, which is you're already in the mindset of like, let's not get too comfortable here. I know things could change and I'm going to let it happen, rather than, oh man, here we go again. Like things are about to change. This sucks. So I really love that you've embraced that. And I don't know, man. I don't know if you can say the same, or you're on the same page here, but I didn't like change. I was very hesitant because comfort was something that is very easy to accept in your life. It's I'm glad that I have a such a strong distaste for boredom, that when I get comfortable, I start feeling that feeling of boredom that's like I could get more. I could do more. I could be more. And that results in me heading down the path that opens up that change for me, where I think a lot of people might get the feeling of, hey, this is good enough. I don't need to do better. I'm fine with where I'm at. So as a result of that, they allow themselves to remain on that plane and not jump off, even though they could have been a beautiful experience if they decided to jump off in the first place.
I think no one likes change. I think people are just fooling themselves. Like, I hate change too, but at the same time, how else are you going to get better, and how else are you going to grow as a person? And like you said, I think boredom, it's funny too, because boredom is actually, how do I phrase this? Is, let's say, the birthplace of negative emotion. I think you can't, it's very hard to be depressed when you're not bored. And I think same thing with, well, okay, maybe not anxiety per se, but if you're constantly chasing something and you're actually interested in it, it seems like it's very easy to keep going with it. And the more, when we become bored, it's almost, I think, like a natural human kind of like experience where it's like, well, I'm in this place that's a little bit too comfortable for me, or maybe a little bit too challenging, and I have to make an adjustment. I think boredom is the initial signal to have, like, I need to adjust something. And being able to be okay with change is very, very difficult. I think for my own experience, it's been challenging to put myself in those situations, even though I know that there's a benefit. And I always recognize that if I do any sort of change, there's going to be initial level of discomfort I have to fight through, and I think normalizing that makes it easier. But like, to your point, reframing that. I think that's the whole thing we're talking about, like with this Roblox too. Like you can look at it as a failure, which is the plan B, that oh my god, I wasn't good enough, so I have to go this way. Where really it's like this path wasn't for me. There's another way around it, and just having like that shift will allow you to actually like chase the right path for you. Because if it's not working, then why not try something else?
Even as I kind of described plan A and plan B, I realized that that mindset of even having a plan B is detrimental, right? Like it's like when you think about a plan B, it means like things didn't go the way it was supposed to. So now you need the next best thing. But it's like, what is a plan B? Like, what if the next step was still part of plan A, right? Like, and I think the reason someone shifts to plan B is because they had a very specific result driven objective that wasn't met. Like, i.e., when you talked about like the police officer, so they saw as police officer was plan A, so I need to go to plan B. Where what you said at the very beginning that was so beautifully put is knowing like the main reason why didn't change, so the plan A is still in motion. It's just what they were mistaking is the how they get there. And I think that that mindset is very important, which is why even I had to check myself. I was like, I got to stop saying plan B because I don't actually believe that there is a plan B. I think there's a plan, not plan A, but a plan. And I think that you just got to see it through. And a lot of that comes with trusting the process here along the way. Camille, as we go into the final few minutes here, I wanted to kind of build a bridge between this and our season finale, which is the underlying meaning that I want to really make sure that we bring home in our next chapter, which is the conversation around what we've been presenting from the very beginning is the ability to become better, right? And the ability of acknowledging that wherever you are in life, there is a room to get bigger. And I think that's also emphasizing the fact that there really isn't a ceiling, right? There's always room to get better. And as a result of that, we shouldn't get too comfortable where we are. When it comes to manifesting, let's say manifesting to become better, which is, I think, something that is worth striving for and what very much attainable and can be attained actually every single day, especially when you're striving to constantly be better than yesterday. I think it's something that you could strive for every single day for the rest of your life. What does that mindset look like around manifestation? When we lay down our definition of manifesting, what are your thoughts in building that bridge of how someone could strive to become better and kind of like the framework that's needed based on the way that we've been defining it in today's episode?
I think it all boils down to manifestation is about becoming more of yourself. And that's an exciting thing because we'll never know who we are and there's no limitations to the self. Like I think it's just pure potential. So when I want something and I want to manifest it, I have to look at whether or not that's an external or internal thing. And if it's external, then I would break that down and try to find out why. Like, why do I want this external thing? Because maybe that's what this internal reason is lacking. And why is it lacking? And how is this important to me? How does it relate to who I am and who I want to be? Is what I would explore. And then when I have that clearly defined, I can look back at that external desire and say, does that match with this new internal thing that I discovered about myself? And if it does, perfect. That means that I can have a source of unlimited motivation. I can make it my purpose to do so because that unlocks more of me. And as a result, I would take that external want and then I would break it down. And I'd break it down into how to do that and what I would need to sacrifice and to do in order to get that. Is that worth the sacrifice or is there another way? And then I would look and research into options how to do it. And then I would, as you said, implement the SMART goals, the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely goals, and break it down to smaller ones. And then I'd set those as kind of motivators to me to go to the right path. And if I would try to set aside my expectations because, like you said, as soon as you frame that as this is plan A and this is plan B, then there's an expectation there. So plan B is worse than plan A. So why am I even wasting time devoting my energy there? Where instead, if you tell yourself this is the goal, and then you break it down to the smaller one and say this is what I'm chasing, then you just focus on the next step. And I think having that in your mind goes there. And when I feel demotivated, I connected back to my core values, which is what I want to manifest initially from that external thing. I would go back to the internal, and then I line it again, and naturally, I found I had a lot more drive to push, and I'd be able to push further. So by doing so, it allows me to go further. And sometimes when that doesn't work, looking back at my progress and comparing myself to who I was before my pursuit is a lot better than comparing myself to someone else. I think that's where you can actually have the sense of gratitude and then let that fuel you and just realize that this is a process and that'll foster, like you said, it's very important patience and diligence. So I think having that focus there and the gratitude is essential. And the most important thing I think is being able to define the internal thing that you're trying to manifest.
Man, this might be one of the most important episodes and chapters in this entire podcast, because I think with these couple of hours alone that we spent today dissecting down the definition and examples that we've given, it's really a very surface level realization, right? It's that realization that every single one of us, if we had the choice, we would take more than less, right? We would take more from what we can get from life's opportunities. And for you to get more out of life opportunities, there's a clear correlation that by you being better, you get more opportunities. And by you being better, it's knowing that from what you just explained so great, it's the realization that it's possible and you can start getting better right away to get more opportunities. And we've given tons of examples in today's chapter to really break that out. And, I asked the listeners that if you just think about who you were in November last year to who you are now, whatever your definition of better is, some may jump right into like, how much do I weigh? Some may say, how much money do I have in my bank account? Some may say, am I in a relationship or not in a relationship? Some may say, have I got more done this year or less done this year? Whatever your definition is, are you better than November last year? And if you're not, know that you can be better next year and know that you can look back and be better. And what better will give you, and I promise you, without a shadow of a doubt, that in the journey of the next 12 months of trying to get better, you don't even have to wait till you get to your best. You will be picking up opportunities along the way, because that's the beauty of life, is when you get those hints along the way that you're on the right track by opportunities that get presented to you over and over and over again, so that you can enjoy the benefits of that short-term sprint in the midst of the long-term journey. I think it becomes a beautiful thing. And I think, Camille, I have to give both of us a virtual pat on the back, because I think that what we've really done in this episode is, someone like myself, if I listened to this episode and only this episode and never knew anything about either one of the hosts here, I think I'd have the confidence to at least try to get better. And it starts with our definition of manifestation, which isn't just about wishing it, but actually getting up and putting in the work to get closer to it every single day.
Yeah, I think it's amazing too. I look at that and it's amazing what you kind of fleshed out for me. Like you said, this surface level realization, which I don't think is a surface level. It's more that it's from the deep and now it's surfaced, so I can actually be more conscious about it. Like actually having it in words now, that to me manifestation is actually about unlocking more of myself, uh, is something I'm going to take away from this, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you.
The best part about this podcast show is that we get better as we chat more and more. I can't tell you how many times I've found myself taking in what we've talked about and a lot of the things that you shared that I let settle in a little bit. And then later down the road, without even realizing it, subconsciously implementing it into my life. And I can't be thankful enough. And listeners, I hope you get just as much as even I do selfishly on this podcast show. And if you do, and you're watching us, whether it's on YouTube or audio platform, my encouragement is to like, subscribe, or follow us in order to stay on top of every single episode that gets released. starting with the season finale that'll be released next week, followed by you never know when that new season is starting. So you definitely want to be in the loop when that happens. And if you follow us on Instagram, where we're going to be constantly posting clips from our highlight reel on top of updates for our next season, do follow us. Our Instagram handle is the Modern Mindset Podcast. And by following us, let us know your favorite episode and maybe one takeaway that was valuable to you so that we could continue nurturing it. As you've seen in many past episodes, we read the reviews that come in, we read quotes that you share with us, we read feedback that is presented, and we make sure that we involved you as much as we can. And I'm going to manifest this right now, Camille, so that I could come back and I can revisit this clip right here at this moment to tell you that it came true, is that my vision is you and me in a live audience platform having a full conversation about any given topic around the conversation of modern mindset, and allowing the live audience to be part of this while they're watching us discuss it and maybe even take Q&A after. I'm throwing that up there into the universe, but I'm also going to make it happen. And Camille, as always, I want to thank you not only for today, man, but 14 weeks in a row of giving me your best every single time and being a true friend that has really added incredible value to my life. And when it comes to the world of manifestation, really played a huge role in why a lot of the things that I've manifested in my life has come true as well. So thank you for being such a big part of my life. And I believe the audience members audience members' lives as well, very much down the road.
I can't say words can't describe how much I'm grateful for you as well. Like I think with you being in my life, it's been just an upward trajectory to being more of who I am, and I can't express how that has impacted me and all the lessons you share too. It's amazing how much insight you've provided that actually sticks in my mind and I carry every day. So I can't thank you enough for that.
And listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in week after week. Whether this is your first or your 14th, we're forever grateful, and your feedback is our oxygen. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Sunday for the season finale of the Modern Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Mahfouz. This is my host, Camille. We thank you for tuning in. Have an incredible Sunday, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, everyone.